June 24th was the anniversary of Dobbs v. Jackson, the Supreme Court decision that overturned Roe v. Wade. Roe needed to be overturned. It was evil and unconstitutional. Unfortunately, so is Dobbs. Let's talk about why.
Faith News Brief.
Before we get into it, I want to invite you to sign up for Project 1815. That's my free weekly email briefing of Christian news, Bible insights, and church history that goes far beyond what I cover here on the channel. So why do I say that Dobbs was unconstitutional? It's because while Dobbs correctly acknowledges that the Constitution does not have a right to abortion, it incorrectly allows states to deny some persons, preborn persons, the equal protection of the laws. This violates the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment prohibits any state from denying equal protection of the laws to any person within that state's jurisdiction. Simply, the Supreme Court should have gone further and acknowledged that states have no right to allow abortion, period. And you know what? If that doesn't convince you that Dobbs, it was a bad decision, think about this. There were over 1 million abortions in 2023, the year after the Dobbs decision. That was the first time that that estimate reached that high, past that 1 million threshold, since 2012, in over a decade. Then again, in 2024, the same thing. Over 1 million abortions happened that year. Does that sound like a slam dunk victory for the cause of life? Wisdom is justified by her children. In other words, a wise decision produces a good outcome. And of course, the opposite is also true. If you have a bad outcome, then you can safely say that it was a bad decision. How can leaders in the pro-life movement act as if Dobbs was a victory when these are the very leaders who often preach pragmatism? They say we've got to get a little ground here and a little ground there because we're trying to save as many lives as possible. How can these leaders celebrate Dobbs when the numbers are in? This was pragmatically a failure. And there have certainly been more abortions than those estimates account for, because those estimates do not include abortions that took place outside the formal healthcare system or abortion pills mailed to people in states with total bans. Now listen carefully. There is no state that outlaws those two categories for the mother. Mothers all across the United States are completely allowed to have abortions if they do it themselves. They're allowed to use any means, and very often they use abortion pills. That includes those states with supposed total bans, and that's why it's a misnomer. So what about those states with total bans? Is there any way to estimate the number of abortions that are happening in those states with the abortion pill? Well, the Foundation to Abolish Abortion did exactly that. They released a report showing how, despite Roe v. Wade's overturn causing some significant changes to abortion laws, self-managed abortion still remains legal for women in all 50 states, including those that claim to have banned abortion. So based on data from 2022, the report estimates that 12 states that had already implemented bans by August 2022 may have had 52,553 self-managed abortions in a 12-month period. Does that sound like a total ban? Certainly not. Now, that's not the only thing happening, because mothers are not only using abortion pills. And so here I'm going to read from an op-ed that I published in the Louisville Courier-Journal a couple months ago. And this is what I wrote. Many abortion-minded mothers are turning to pills to end their pregnancies, which I believe to be the murder of their preborn children. But that's not the only option. Kentucky law, and it's true for every state, gives them full leeway to use do-it-yourself abortion methods with immunity and impunity. That means homemade concoctions, coat hangers, or even beating their bellies until the child dies are all on the table. These appalling scenarios are not hypotheticals. The Hill reports that after the Dobbs decision, about a quarter of women in the U.S. who were unable to access in-clinic abortions and who opted to self-manage an abortion turned to herbal remedies. About 30% turned to physical methods such as punching themselves in the stomach, lifting heavy objects, or inserting an object into the body. And about a third used alcohol or other drugs or medications. And I write, these are vile things to imagine, but they are legal. If it's vile, it's on us. We are allowing that. So this is the post-Roe world, a barbaric landscape of increasing do-it-yourself abortions in addition to the clinics that still remain. Now, were some individual lives saved by the overturn of Roe with the Dobbs decision? Maybe. There are certainly pro-life articles that make that argument. But 2 points. First of all, those lives would have been saved just the same if the Supreme Court had applied equal protection to all preborn persons and saved all the babies. Those lives would have been saved, and so would have many others been saved. Second, while the change in law may have deterred some mothers from getting abortions because they were uncertain about whether they would get in trouble if they did get one, the change didn't actually save any of those children's lives. Why is that? Because any one of those children's lives could have still been legally snuffed out by chemical abortion, the pill, or by any other do-it-yourself abortion method, because no state anywhere prohibits the mother herself from doing that. So what is the solution to this problem? I'll get to that in a minute, but first, can we just acknowledge, can we just stop acting like the Dobbs decision was a good one? Abortions could have been over in this nation. The fight could have been over if only those Supreme Court justices had done what they should have done and applied the Constitution, applied equal protection, applied the legal doctrine that is foundational, one of the foundational legal doctrines that we say we believe in this nation. It's inscribed on the front of the Supreme Court building. Equal justice under law. That's biblical, you know. Proverbs 20, verse 10 says, unequal weights and unequal measures are both alike an abomination to the Lord. When it comes to human life, that means God hates when one life is treated as less valuable than another. Preborn humans are just as valuable as any other human. Plus, God commands, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. He does not add, unless your neighbor isn't born yet. That means whatever laws we use to protect ourselves must be used to protect all other humans, including our preborn neighbors. By failing to protect them from murder with the same laws that we use to protect ourselves, we are violating this command, which Jesus says is the second greatest command. In the words of Attorney Bradley Pierce, murdering anyone should be illegal for everyone. And isn't that just logical? No group of people should be exempt from protections against being murdered. And no group of people should be exempt from penalties for murdering anyone else. To allow that is partiality, which God forbids and says is not good. So, the solution is to establish justice. Practically, on the national level, that means there's got to be a constitutional amendment that clarifies, makes it crystal clear that preborn humans are to be considered as persons and given the equal rights, the equal justice, equal value, equal protection as all other humans, and that abortion violates this. That's got to be a constitutional amendment so that we can put the nail in the coffin of this issue once for all across the nation. Now, is that likely to happen anytime soon? Well, it doesn't seem so, the way things stand now. But we've got to talk about it, because that's how you get the ball moving. That's how you get the needle moving in that direction. If nobody talks about it, then it's certainly not going to happen. If it seems far off, then the way that we bring it closer is by talking about it. We need a constitutional amendment that abolishes abortion. But until that constitutional amendment is feasible, we can still work to establish justice on the state level. And we do that by getting our legislators to file bills that add abortion to the homicide code in the state. That would mean abortion would be treated as murder. Now, critics may argue that this is only possible to file these bills because of the Dobbs decision, which returned the power of determining the legality of abortion back to the states. To that, I would say, well, no. Legislators could have been filing these kinds of bills any time over the last 50 plus years as a way of pressing the issue and seeking to protect the children's lives in their state that were at risk for abortion. So what Dobbs did was take away from legislators the excuse that Roe v. Wade was tying their hands. And with that excuse now gone, how many states have legally ended all abortions? Oh yeah, still 0. So you see, it was just an excuse. And that points to a fundamental problem in the pro-life movement, which is deeper than what I can get into right now. But to get back to these bills that would add abortion to the homicide code in the state, these types of bills are increasingly being filed in states across the nation each year. And the movement is gaining progress bit by bit. In fact, a recent article on a pro-abortion Substack, which happened to mention my Courier Journal op-ed, lamented this very fact, that there is a creeping normalization of justice happening across the nation. So if you are ready to join the movement and get into this fight, there's a link in the description box for how you can get connected with a group in your area that is already working on it. Let's do it. You know, there's also an urgent new strategy to abolish abortion that I just wrote about in a recent Project 1815. Here's how the article starts. There's a path to abolish abortion that no one has pursued, but the window of opportunity is closing. That's the contention of Chris Martinson, director of the anti-abortion ministry, Voice for the Voiceless, Utah. So that article is linked below as well. Check that out to learn more about that and to sign up for Project 1815. If you will, subscribe to this channel, like this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.